Tom Brokaw spent decades as the most trusted voice in American news. Now at 86, he is speaking again, and what he is saying about Savannah Guthrie is not what anyone expected. Something quietly shifted inside NBC's most iconic morning show. The ratings tell one story. The insiders tell another. And Brokaw, a man who has never been afraid of an uncomfortable truth, just added a third. What does a broadcasting legend see that the rest of the world is missing? There are people who become famous. And then there are people who become part of a country's memory. Tom Brokaw belongs to the second group. For more than 4 decades, his voice was the one Americans turned to when the world stopped making sense. He was not just a face on a screen. He was a presence. Steady, serious, trustworthy in a way that felt earned, not performed. He anchored NBC Nightly News from 1982 to 2004, over 2 decades in the most demanding chair in American broadcast journalism. During that time, he did not simply report the news. He bore witness to history. He was in Berlin in 1989 when the wall came down, standing in the middle of one of the most defining moments of the 20th century, describing what he saw with a clarity that millions of people still remember. He was in the studio on the morning of September 11, 2001, when the world changed in real time, and he held the broadcast together with a calm that the moment almost made impossible. In 1998, he published a book called The Greatest Generation, a tribute to the Americans who lived through the Great Depression and fought in World War II. It became one of the best-selling nonfiction books in American publishing history. It was not a political book. It was not a celebrity memoir. It was journalism done with the heart of a historian, and it connected with millions of readers in a way that pure news coverage rarely does. By any honest measure, Tom Brokaw was not just a journalist. He was a national institution. But institutions are not immune to time, and they are not immune to controversy. In 2018, as the broader reckoning inside the media industry was forcing names and stories into the open, accusations of inappropriate behavior were made against Brokaw by former colleagues. The allegations were serious. Brokaw denied them completely and with force. A large number of current and former NBC colleagues signed a letter of support. The story played out publicly, painfully. And then, as these stories sometimes do, it faded. The legal and professional consequences were limited. But something else changed. The media world, which had celebrated Brokaw for decades, went quiet around him. He did not disappear. He continued to write and speak. But the industry that had once treated him as one of its defining figures began to look past him. He became, in a quiet and uncomfortable way, a man the establishment preferred not to discuss. And through all of it, he was also fighting something far more personal. In 2013, Brokaw was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, a form of blood cancer with no cure. He went public with the diagnosis in 2014, and the response from the American public was immediate and deeply felt. People who had grown up watching him on the evening news wrote letters. Strangers stopped him in airports. He wrote about the experience honestly, describing the fear, the treatment, and the strange clarity that a serious illness brings. He is still here, at 86, still thinking, still watching, still willing to say the things that other people in his world calculate too carefully to say out loud. That willingness is exactly what makes his recent comments about Savannah Guthrie worth paying attention to. Not because of the drama, not because of the headlines, but because when a man with that biography, that track record, that history, that willingness to absorb personal cost, decides to speak about the state of the institution he spent his life building, it means something. The question was never whether Tom Brokaw had earned the right to speak. He earned that right a long time ago. The real question is whether anyone inside the building is listening. And based on everything that has happened at NBC over the past few years, that answer is far more complicated than it should be. Behind the warm lights and the carefully rehearsed smiles of NBC's Today Show, a different kind of pressure has been building for years. It is not the kind that shows up in press releases or morning show promos. It is the kind that lives in contract negotiations, internal memos, and the quiet conversations that happen just off camera. Savannah Guthrie did not arrive at that anchor desk by luck. She built her career methodically and seriously. Before television made her famous, she was a practicing attorney, licensed in both Arizona and Washington, D.C. That detail matters. It says something about how she thinks, how she processes information, and how she approaches a story. She is not someone who stumbled into journalism through charm alone. She came equipped with a legal mind in a profession that rewards the ability to ask the right question at exactly the right moment. She joined NBC News in 2008 and worked her way through the ranks with a consistency that the industry respected. By 2012, she was named co-anchor of The Today Show, one of the most visible positions in American morning television. It was a significant moment. The show had been a dominant force in American homes for decades, and stepping into that role meant stepping into a legacy that carried both enormous opportunity and enormous expectation. For a time, things looked stable, strong even. But the television landscape was already beginning to shift underneath her feet in ways that no anchor, no matter how talented, could fully control. Morning television is no longer what it was in the era that made Tom Brokaw's colleagues famous. It is not even what it was 15 years ago. The audience has fragmented. Attention has migrated to smartphones, podcasts, streaming platforms, and social media feeds that deliver news in 30-second clips rather than 30-minute broadcasts. The viewers who remain loyal to traditional morning shows are older. The viewers networks desperately want to attract are elsewhere, and increasingly difficult to reach. This created a tension inside today that became impossible to ignore. On one side, the need to serve a loyal, aging core audience that expects warmth, reliability, and familiar faces. On the other side, the pressure from network executives to generate viral moments, shareable content, and celebrity-driven segments that could compete for attention in a digital ecosystem built on speed and sensation. Those two goals do not naturally live together. And the people caught most visibly in the middle of that conflict are the anchors. Then came 2017. Matt Lauer, co-anchor, ratings cornerstone, and one of the most recognized faces in morning television, was fired abruptly following misconduct allegations. The fallout was swift, public, and deeply destabilizing for everyone around him. Guthrie delivered the news to viewers on air that same morning, visibly shaken, choosing her words with the careful precision of someone who had not slept and was being asked to perform composure in real time. It was one of the most difficult moments in the show's modern history, and she carried it. But carrying difficult moments has a cost that cameras do not capture. And in the years that followed, the scrutiny around Guthrie, her ratings, her chemistry with co-hosts, her coverage decisions, never fully lifted. Brokaw was watching all of it, and what he saw was not what the morning show wanted the world to see. That is where this story starts to get interesting. There is a particular kind of credibility that only comes with distance. When someone is still inside a system, still drawing a salary from it, still dependent on its approval, still calculating the cost of every honest word, they cannot speak freely. Not really. They can hint. They can hedge. They can gesture toward the truth without ever fully committing to it. Tom Brokaw is no longer inside the system, and that changes everything. His comments about Savannah Guthrie did not arrive as a formal statement or a prepared press release. They came the way most honest things come, gradually, in interviews and conversations, through the careful observations of a man who has spent a lifetime learning how to read a room and is no longer afraid of what he sees. What Brokaw has expressed in various forms and settings over recent months is not a personal grievance against Guthrie. Anyone reading it that way is missing the point entirely. His concern is structural. It is institutional. It is a kind of critique that only makes sense when it comes from someone who remembers what the institution used to be and can see, with the clarity of someone standing outside it, what it has slowly become. He has spoken about the erosion of hard news values inside morning television, about the way commercial pressure now shapes not just what stories get covered, but how they get covered, the tone, the length, the angle, the questions that get asked, and the ones that quietly get left out. He has pointed to a culture inside broadcast journalism where the priority has shifted from informing the public to retaining the audience, and where those two goals, which once pointed in the same direction, have drifted dangerously apart. Savannah Guthrie, in Brokaw's framing, is not the problem. She is the evidence. She is a talented, serious journalist being asked to operate inside a format that does not always reward serious journalism. She is being pulled between the expectations of a legacy institution and the demands of a modern media economy that has very little patience for depth, nuance, or stories that take longer than 90 seconds to tell. And the result, Brokaw suggests, is visible to anyone willing to look at it honestly. Consider the 2020 town hall, when Savannah Guthrie moderated a session with then-President Donald Trump, a moment that aired opposite a simultaneous Biden town hall on ABC. She pressed him firmly and persistently on a range of contested claims. It was one of the most direct exchanges between a morning anchor and a sitting president in recent memory. Some called it exactly what journalism is supposed to look like. Others called it combative and inappropriate for the format. The split reaction was telling, not because one side was right and the other wrong, but because it revealed how divided the audience and the industry itself had become on the most basic question in journalism. What is a journalist actually supposed to do? Brokaw's generation had a clearer answer. You ask the hard question. You follow the evidence. You serve the public record, not the ratings board. That clarity, he suggests, has not survived the transition into the modern media era intact. And the pressure that Guthrie operates under every single day is partly a consequence of that loss. This is not nostalgia. It is diagnosis. And it deserves to be taken seriously. Because if someone with Brokaw's record is saying the system is broken, the conversation should probably begin with asking whether he is right, not with debating whether he still has the standing to say it. Some problems are easy to see from the outside. Others only become visible when the numbers start telling a story that the people inside the building cannot afford to acknowledge. Morning television has been in quiet crisis for years. Not the dramatic, sudden kind of crisis that generates headlines and emergency meetings. The slow kind. The kind that builds gradually, almost invisibly, until one day the gap between what something used to be and what it has become is too wide to explain away. The Today Show launched in 1952. It was, by any measure, a revolutionary concept, a morning program that blended news, conversation, and human interest in a format that American audiences had never seen before. For decades, it dominated. It set the tone for the morning. It shaped how millions of people began their day. At its peak, it was not just a television program. It was a cultural habit. That habit has been breaking down for a long time now. According to Nielsen data tracked across the past decade, the average age of the traditional morning show viewer has climbed steadily upward. The core audience, the people who still turn on the television at 7 in the morning and leave it running through the first hour of their day, skews older, significantly older. The younger demographics that advertisers pay the highest premiums to reach have moved. They are on YouTube. They are on podcasts. They are scrolling through curated feeds that deliver exactly the kind of news they want in exactly the format they prefer, without commercials and without a format decided by a network programming executive. This is not a Today Show problem specifically. It is an industry problem. ABC's Good Morning America, CBS Mornings, and every other traditional morning format is navigating the same structural reality. The audience that made these programs powerful is aging. The audience that could replace them is not coming. But knowing that does not make the pressure easier to manage from inside the building. What it creates for anchors like Savannah Guthrie is an almost impossible position. The network needs her to hold the existing audience, to be warm, familiar, and consistent for viewers who have been waking up with Today for 20 or 30 years. At the same time, executives are chasing digital relevance, pushing for moments that will clip well on social media, segments that will generate shares and comments, and the kind of online engagement that can be presented to advertisers as evidence of a living, breathing brand. Those two pressures produce different kinds of television. And when they are applied simultaneously to the same program and the same anchor, what results is a show that can feel uncertain about its own identity. Brokaw has watched this tension play out across his entire post-retirement life. He has seen what happens when a news organization stops trusting its own editorial instincts and starts designing content around the metrics of platforms that were built for entertainment, not information. He has seen it before, in different forms, at different networks, and he knows how it ends. The people who suffer most visibly are never the executives who made the decisions. They are the anchors, the reporters, the journalists who came into the profession because they believed it mattered, and who now spend a significant portion of their working lives navigating institutional priorities that have quietly drifted away from that original belief. Think about what that costs a person over time. Not financially, professionally, psychologically. The slow erosion of being asked, day after day, to be something slightly different from what you trained to be. If you have ever felt the pressure of being asked to perform a version of yourself that does not quite fit, to smile when the situation does not call for it, to soften something that deserves to be said plainly, then you already understand something about what the best journalists in morning television are quietly living with. That tension is real, it is documented, and it is not going away. The next question, the one nobody inside NBC is asking loudly enough, is what happens when that tension finally reaches a breaking point. There is a moment in every long career when the noise fades. The deadlines stop. The cameras step back. The industry that once needed a person's voice every single evening moves on to other voices, other faces, other urgencies. And in that quiet, something becomes possible that was never quite possible before. Honest reflection. Tom Brokaw has been living in that space for years now. And it has not made him bitter. It has made him clear. The people who have spent time with Brokaw in recent years describe someone who is not defined by what he lost or what was taken from him. They describe a man who remains genuinely curious about the world, who reads deeply, who asks questions with the same precision he brought to a White House press briefing 40 years ago. The illness slowed his body. It did not slow his mind. And his mind keeps returning to the same place. To journalism, to what it was supposed to be, to what it is becoming, and to the people who are now carrying something he spent his life helping to build. Savannah Guthrie is one of those people, not in a symbolic way, in a direct, institutional way. She sits in a chair that connects back through decades of American broadcast history, through anchors and correspondents and producers who believed, sometimes against all evidence, that what they were doing mattered. That telling the truth on a large platform was a form of public service. That the audience deserved to be informed, not just entertained. Brokaw believed that too. He has always believed it. And that belief is precisely why watching the current state of morning television is, for him, not a passive experience. When he speaks about Guthrie, there is something underneath the commentary that reads less like criticism and more like concern. The concern of someone who has seen talented people ground down by institutional pressures that had nothing to do with their ability or their commitment. The concern of someone who knows that the system around a journalist can shape them in ways that are difficult to see from the inside and almost impossible to resist without significant personal cost. He is not saying Guthrie has failed. He is saying the system around her is failing. And that distinction matters enormously, because one of those things is a story about a person, and the other is a story about an institution that affects everyone who works inside it and everyone who relies on it for information. Legacy is a strange thing to carry. It is invisible most of the time. It does not show up in the day-to-day work of keeping a live broadcast on the air, managing co-host dynamics, and navigating the editorial decisions that come at speed inside a morning show format. But it is always present. It shapes expectations. It creates a standard that the people who built it may not have intended as a burden, but that functions as one regardless. Brokaw built part of that standard. He knows its weight better than almost anyone still alive who worked inside American broadcast journalism at its most influential point. And now, watching someone else carry it in a media environment that he could not have fully imagined when he was at the height of his own career, he is doing the only thing left that a person of his experience and integrity can do. He is saying what he sees, not for headlines, not for relevance, not to settle old scores or to remind an industry that once celebrated him and then quietly moved past him that he is still here. He is saying it because he believes it is true. And because somewhere in the long education of a life spent in journalism, he learned that the truth, even the uncomfortable kind, even the kind that the people in the building would prefer to leave unsaid, has a way of mattering more over time, not less. The camera does not determine what is real. It only determines what is seen. Tom Brokaw has spent a long time understanding the difference between those two things. And what he is pointing at now, the quiet crisis inside morning television, the pressure on the people who anchor it, the slow drift away from the values that once made it genuinely important, that is real whether the cameras are pointed at it or not. The chapter he is writing now is not the one anyone expected from him, but it may turn out to be one of the most important ones. Because the next video in this series goes deeper, inside the executive decisions at NBC that the anchors are never supposed to talk about, and the reasons why the people closest to the camera are always the last ones to know what is actually being decided about their future. That story is coming, and it is not a simple one.